Established in 2007, Middle East Studies at Marine Corps University brings in guest lecturers to speak about topics of importance to the United States Marine Corps and wider Department of Defense and U.S. government communities concerning the Middle East, broadly defined. In line with Middle East Studies' mission, the MES lecture series and other MES talks and panels provide up-to-date information and analysis on the broader Middle East, including South and Central Asia, North and Sub-Saharan Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Black Sea and Red Sea regions.
Welcome to everyone on both sides of the pond. It is with distinct honor and pleasure to introduce a person that perhaps is best equipped to discuss our current lecture series topic, which is the Mediterranean. Broadly speaking, we are covering the concentration has been mostly here at MCU, at least for us, for the CRULAC scholars, Eastern Mediterranean, but there's no line in that division between Eastern and Western Mediterranean, but Mediterranean as a whole. And I don't see any better person to discuss that than our current speaker. And I have the distinct honor of introducing Admiral Pascal Ausseur. He is the Director General of MES, Mediterranean Foundation for Strategic Studies in Toulouse, France. Admiral Ausseur, after entering the Naval Academy in 1981, has held many distinguished ranks within the French Navy as a Wing Vice Admiral. That's a 2-star. Admiral Ausseur had an operational career in the surface forces, particularly within the Naval Air Group. Having sailed for 15 years, he commanded the sea 3 times, Jaguar, commandant of l'Arménier and Jean Bart. He's also taken part in numerous operational missions, particularly in the Mediterranean. Afterwards, the Admiral assumed responsibilities for the political military field and international relations within the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Republic of France, international bodies such as UN, European Union, and NATO, and the Director General of Armaments. After having served twice in the office of the Minister of Defense as head of the international cell, looking at Western world and Asia, then the head of the military cabinet. He was appointed Maritime Prefect, commander of the Maritime Zone and District of the English Channel and the North Sea. He joined the management of MES in October 2018. Sir, with pleasure, thank you for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Amin. Very happy to see you again, and very pleased to take part to this seminar. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to try to give you a French perspective of this area, this region. East Med is key, and I will focus on East Med, even if my the title of my presentation was Med. East Med is, I would say, a concentration of the problems that we have in the Mediterranean. So very happy to give you my perspective on this strategic region, and very happy to do it for the Marine Corps University. You know, as a former French officer, I know very well what the Battle of Bois-Belleau means for you, for the Corps, and for France as well. And in my view, and it could be the introduction, this Bois-Belleau remembrance makes very much sense now, especially now, because history is coming back. And that will be one of my main points for this lecture. I would say history is coming back because we are living a global strategic rupture, very, very important rupture, which has two pillars. First, history is back, and the second one, the West, I would say, I could say West is down. It's not. It's a bit too far away. The West is in bad shape globally, and that's clearly. I think we have to take it in mind when you think about strategic evolution geopolitical evolution, and military action in the years to come. You know, I joined you told it. I joined the Navy in '81. It was right after one of the Cold War climax. In fact, the invasion of Afghanistan by the USSR in '79, and we were preparing at those time for World War III. And for 10 years, during 10 years, we have, and I was at sea working with NATO, with the Allies to prepare for the World War III. And then, at the beginning of the 90s, I witnessed the end of the Cold War and the new world. So it was a strategic rupture. And everybody thought at those times that the economy was going to fix everything, and the military was going to be used only to solve crisis, not war, crisis. And this crisis were rather in the south. Remember the motto of President Clinton? No, you don't. The oldest of you can remember the motto of President Clinton election: "The economy is stupid." It means that for them, but for everybody, for most of the people at this time, the economy was the alpha and omega of human actions and international actions, and everybody was connected with the economy. And so the military was clearly aside just to solve crisis. And this crisis was most of them, and in the Mediterranean it was the case, in the Middle East and in the MENA region it was the case, it was connected with Islam. After the Iran Revolution, by the way, Iran Revolution was in '79, the same years of the invasion of Afghanistan, but at those times nobody cares about Iran Revolution. And nobody foresees the fact that this revolution was given the start for 3 decades of, I would say, radical Islamism, and so end of this point. I just wanted to say that the crisis in the south, where most of them were connected with radicalism of Islam, with terrorism, what we called at those time terrorism, and which became, because Islam and became the main ideology which federates the antagonism of the South against the West. Before you had Marxism and Islam and radical Islam, Islamism, in fact, was this new ideology. So I spent nearly 30 years in these combats in Balkans. It was more the end of the Cold War legacy, and then in Lebanon, in the Gulf, in Africa, yeah, but as well South Sahelian zone, in the Med, in this kind of operations. And we knew, everybody knew, especially in the military, that it was just a short period, that the return of the big threats from powerful powers were going to come back, especially China. But I think that they came back faster and stronger than expected, and it is now the case. That's the reason why I spoke about strategic rupture. And when I would like to have a top-down approach, so going from the general to the particular. And so just a word about the world as I see it today. And in my view, the key words that best describes today's world is the word fragmentation. During this period after the Cold War, for 30 years, the world was supposed to homogenize. The economy where the development of the GDP was supposed to to lead to social development, to easing of tensions, to social progress, to democratization. So end of history paradigm. And in the Med, for example, clearly it was a point of application of this vision. The convergence of the two shores of the Mediterranean was considered as inevitable. And when you think about all the process, in the EU you have the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership. In NATO, we had the Mediterranean Dialogue. You had the Israeli-Palestinian Oslo Accords. All these agreements was place themselves in the trend of a quasi-automatic pacification of this region, and which was gradually integrate itself into a form of European melting pot. And clearly, it's not the case. It was a failure, and this convergence did not occur. And at the opposite, we see a fragmentation. And this fragmentation, which is very sensible inside society, is very sensible as well between societies. And one of the consequences is a de-Westernization. I don't know if it makes sense in English, but I guess you see what I want to mean. The de-Westernization of the world. The fact that the West was much less attractive for a lot of people. In the case of the Mediterranean, you had very strong discrepancies between the north and the south. I will go back to this point later because it's very important. And it creates a huge feeling of resentment vis-à-vis the north, towards the north. And I think you can't study the world as it is now without taking into account the fact that there is a huge anti-Western ideology which is not on the rise and which brings together all of the non-Western people and which participates to this de-Westernization of the world. And it is very sensible in the Med, it's very sensible in the MENA, in the Middle East, but it's very sensible in China as well. And look at the reaction with the Ukrainian war, and you look at this resentment towards the West, and it's very interesting to see to ask, wonder why this feeling is so strong. So when you speak about the Mediterranean today, clearly it's not a Mare Nostrum at all. So just another point for me, I would like to is why Eastern Mediterranean is crucial for European countries, and at least very important for the US. And it's a small part of the world. You know, the Med is only 1% of the water in the world, the sea, the planet. And in this whole area, we have a concentrate of a lot of stakes. And first of all, this area is at the center of the world trade. And you know, the world trade is first of all a maritime trade. 80% of the trade in the world is done by sea. And when you see the sea lines of communications, you see that most of them are connected with a MENA area. Yes, you know that already, so I will go very fast on it. But, you have 4 main gates in the world when you speak about global trade. One in Asia, and one in Europe, North Range in Europe, Netherlands and Belgium and north of France, and 2 in the States, West and East. And with that, you do 75% of the global trade. And you have a 5th part, which is very important, is the Persian Gulf, which is the oil pumps of the workshop of the world, Asia. More than 50% of the energy in China is coming from the Persian Gulf. So you can see that this area, I guess you see my arrow, this area is at the center of the strategic center for the trade. Another point I would like to mention, you know, a big part of the global traffic is going around Africa or in the Pacific, so not in the Med. Just 10% of the global trade is going through the canal, Suez Canal. But for Russia, for Turkey, for Egypt, this Suez Canal and Red Sea area and Bab el Mandeb choke point is vital. So I would say that this area is crucial not only because we need it, but because it's very important for very important countries, and which has a very high capability of destabilization. Last point, for militaries, you can go around Africa to join the Indian Ocean and to join the Gulf, to join Asia from America or from Europe, but you are losing 10 days. 10 days. The shortcut of the Suez Canal, of this area through the Med and through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, is roughly between 7 and 10 days of sea. And when you speak about military deployment, it's very important. It's very important. It is another reason why this area is key. When you speak about internet, you know that more than 90%, 95% of the internet is going through undersea cables, and these undersea cables are following the routes, the sea routes. So most of them are going through the Med and through the Suez Canal, and that's another point why this area is very important. You can imagine what will happen if these cables were cut, and you can imagine what's the meaning of spying these cables. Another point, just a point to say that for Russia, for China, most of their internet communication are going through onshore cables, and so their vulnerabilities are less important than ours in that field. Another point which makes this area very important, at least for the region, is the discovery of gas deposits in Eastern Med under the sea. There are roughly more than 3,000 billion cubic meters of gas. It is equivalent to Norwegian reserves. It's not so much compared to Russia or to Iran reserves, but it can make the difference for the countries, for Turkey, for Egypt, for Israel, for Palestinian Authority, for Lebanon, and for Cyprus. All these countries, very fragile for most of them, can benefit from this gas. And that's very interesting because it's a good illustration of the fact that, economic perspective could ease tensions or not. In that case, this possibility of earning money with the gas in this area ease tensions between Egypt, Israel, Jordania, Cyprus, even the Palestinian Authority. And you know that there is a forum Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, which has been created to share these reserves and to try to have a common profit of it. And it makes sense because, you know, the investments are very important, and the more you are around the table, the easiest it is to organize. And at the same time, you have Turkey, which is not part of this game, which used this opportunity to as a tool to antagonize and to overcome his neighbors, especially neighbors he wants to dominate, I would say. It's the case of Cyprus, it's the case of Greece, and it's an opportunity for them to, and I will go back to Turkey later on, but it's an opportunity to gain more weight, geopolitical weight in the region. So this gas issue is another reason why this area is so important. And I have another point. It is anti-ballistic missiles defense. You know that ABMBD is very important, not only for the US, but for the US, for your country. Most of the system is dedicated against ICBM coming from Russia. Most of these missiles are going through over the North Pole. ABMD system in the Med are not very important, but in fact, all the detection, the warning system, the interception in the ascending phase could come from the south flank of the system, and that's the first point, and that's the reason why there are radars and SAD systems, Aegis frigates in Sigonella, and radars in Romania, in Black Seas, and so on. First to cover the southern flank of Russia's threats in terms of ballistic missiles. Iran's development of medium-range ballistic missiles, is as well another reason. It has, I would say, strengthened the interest of this system to protect allies, US allies, and to protect US forces in the MENA region. So it's very interesting that this area presents an interest for the US from this perspective as well. Another point of this slide, I would just like to underline the fact that this slide shows how, with the new systems, armament system, not only ballistic missiles, but as well anti-surface, anti-ground missiles, cruise missiles, radars, drones, and so on. The A2AD systems makes this area shrinking. And it's an important point, in my view, to understand that the use of the sea everywhere, the use of the airspace everywhere, but especially in this very small and crowded area, Mediterranean, Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, Persian Gulf, north of Indian Ocean, makes this area much more difficult to use by military forces. And the proliferation of all these armaments, look at what's happened in the Black Sea. The Black Sea is, in fact, like a lake, it's a very small sea, and you see what's happened to the Moskva. We all know, as the sailors, I know perfectly well that it's very easy now for most of the countries which are around the Mediterranean Sea. It's very easy for them to shoot at ships to prevent aircraft to fly over them, because there are proliferation of S-400, you know, caliber missiles. I don't speak about zircon and all that stuff, but even Occidental Western missiles. I have made an operation when I was commanding officer. It was in 2006 in front of Lebanon during the Hezbollah-Israel war. I was commanding an air defense destroyer, which was the best of the French Navy at those time. And the Hezbollah was firing C-802 missiles, Chinese missiles, from trucks based in the Beirut airports, south of Beirut, and the C-802 missiles was an anti-ship missile, quite modern, because it was a copy of an Harpoon, Chinese copy, very efficient and not so easy to manage for a modern destroyer. And it was in 2006. So 20 years later, this proliferation of technology makes things much more difficult for Western countries. So it was just a point. Finally, my last idea, which shows that this area is strategic, especially for the US, is the fact that this MENA area, and so Eastern Med, is one of the fronts of the combat that now begins between, on one side, continental powers, mostly autocratic, China, Russia, maybe Iran, and their allies, Pakistan, who knows. And you will see a lot of countries which are going to join them. And I would say, just to be the most neutral as possible, I would say the maritime powers, trade-oriented powers, mainly democratics, not only, and we can see this new trend with a dualistic strategic split for global split. And when you look at the map, and you can see, and you can remember you probably Mahan, Mackinder, Spikeman papers and books. I'm sure you have already read it. But we are back on this situation. And MENA area, as you can see in this map, is a central area, very important in this fight, in this combat, in this new confrontation, which look like a new Cold War, but maybe it will not be only a Cold War, it could be a hot war as well. And this confrontation will structure the 21st century. So for you officers, young officers, this confrontation will be your job, one of your jobs, because you will, I guess you will have several, for the years to come and the decades to come. Other point, so I go back, so you know, from general to particular, I go back to the Mediterranean, and I will show you very quickly how this Mediterranean is an area, a friction area between two worlds, as I told you before. I will show you several maps which illustrate this growing gap between the north and the south shores of the Med. You will see these maps are quite always the same. I will go very fast, so you will see it, but the point is not to look precisely on each map, but to see that they are all similar. And they will cover different metrics, economic, cultural, political, environmental, and you will see two words, European Union on the north, the south, starting from Turkey. You will see that Israel is often like European countries, not always, but often, on a lot of parameters. And you see that some of the Balkans, Turkey sometimes, and Tunisia in the south are sometimes in the middle of these two worlds. And so now I will show you these different maps. The first one, as you can see, is very simple, GDP per capita, so the money, the global money of each country. So you see what I wanted to show you. Israel, which looks like South Europe, Turkey, which is looking, and half of the Balkans countries, more or less from the north. That's a Human Development Index, more subtle, I would say, which integrates education, which integrates social redistribution. Once again, more or less the same situation. Demographic indicators, so completely different, and without any surprise, you see old people in the north and few people in the north, and many and young people in the south. This slide, you have at the same time median age and number of children per woman. You can see that the south of our south, I would say, is souther. It means that the parameter increase when you go south. So it means that the tensions are increasing as well. Environmental Vulnerability Index shows that with global warming, things are worsening, and this gap is will widen in the future. The Corruption Perception Index, and you see the same globally the same position, and you see Tunisia looking a little bit more than the Maghreb country, which looks more like a European country. A democracy index, gender inequality index, so the way women are considered. Once again, always the same, and that's the color. Sorry if the color is a little bit different. That's a COVID index as well, which shows that more or less the same map. So my point, you understand it, I guess, it's two worlds, and these worlds are diverging, which was not the aim and the evaluation 30 years ago. They were supposed to merge. In fact, they diverged. First point. If I can make a comparison, an electrical comparison, it's that these two shores are like two capacitor plates between which the voltage increase. It could be a good thing for when you have a capacitor. I don't know if you are familiar with this mechanic and electrical comparison, but when you have a potential difference between the two plates of the capacitor, it could be good things. It creates energy. You can use it to move engines and so on. But when the voltage increases too much, when the potential difference goes too far, the dielectric between the two breaks down, and you break everything. And that's clearly a point I wanted to underline with this discrepancy between the north and the south shore of the Med. And this tension, if I continue the comparison of electrical comparison, this tension creates frustration. And there is a receptacle of this tension, and it is Islam. That's my next slide. Islam is at the same time a receptacle of this tension. It gives a sense, an intellectual sense, to the frustration which is created by this discrepancy. 30 years ago, it would have been Marxism. Today, it is Islamism. But there is another point, that the internal rivalries within the Muslim community, within Islam, create another source of tension. When you have the rivalries between Sunnis under the leadership of Saudi Arabia and Shiites under the leadership of Iran, the rivalries between political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood under the influence of Qatar, of Turkey, and on the other side, Salafist Islam under the influence of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. All this internal tension inside the Muslim world reinforce the global tension. And the last impact of this, I would say, rise of Islam in the South Shore, the last impact is the reinforcement of the mistrust and the misunderstanding vis-à-vis the Northern Shore. Because the Northern Shore, and I think it's more or less the case in the United States as well, is in the Northern Shore, European countries are in the phase of becoming more and more atheistic. And so it creates clearly a distrust between the two shores and a misunderstanding. And that's part of the equation of the resentment between the South and the North. So another cause and another additional tension, as you can see, there are several layers of tensions which are reinforcing each other. The South is fragmented. When you look at North Africa, it's very interesting to see that it is structured in vertical band of influence. Maghreb is a reality, and at the same time, it's not a reality. It's not a political reality. Morocco has much more connections with Mauritania and Senegal than with Algeria or Tunisia. Algeria is much more connected with Mali, and very strongly connected with Mali. By the way, it is an issue on the Sahelian zone. Libya has a lot of connection with Niger and Chad. It's the same with Egypt and Sudan. And you can see that Tunisia, the small Tunisia, has no connection in the south, very few connections in the south. And that's probably one of the reasons why Tunisia is a more European-minded country of the Maghreb, because its only way to have connections, interconnections and exchange is with Europe. So it's much more Europe-oriented than its neighbors. But the funny thing is that you have east-west borders completely closed and north-south borders completely permeable. And that's that part of the game, if you want to understand this area. And it's generate tensions, especially because, as this arrows shows, a lot in the Sahel-Saharan Strip, which is like a sea. You have to understand that the Maghrebian countries are between two seas, the Mediterranean and the Sahelian area, and the Sahara-Sahelian area. This Sahelian zone is very permeable for trafficking, for terrorism, for armament, human trafficking, armament trafficking, drugs trafficking, and so on. And so I would say that's a pity, because all these countries share a lot of stakes in common, but they are not at all cooperate. And I can be further if you have some question later on that point. Now I will focus on East Med, and I would like to speak about Libya. Libya is facing a paradox which is shared by a lot of countries in the region. Libya is at the same time very nationalist and want to be free itself from interference from foreign powers, Turkey, Europe, US, Egypt, Russia, and so on. And at the same time, it is a country which is very fragmented between East and West. East, Cyrenaica, Benghazi, and West, Tripoli, and between the north and the south, and the Fezzan which is the south part of it, and clearly it's this fragmentation is very, very strong. You see the two prime ministers. In fact, today there are two prime ministers in Tunisia. Mr. Bagasha, which has been elected February by the Parliament of Tobruk, so his part, and versus the official prime minister, I would say, Mr. Al-Daiba, which is supported by Turkey. The other is supported by Russia and by Tripolitan bodies. And so clearly it's another reality of this country, which at the same time wants to get rid of foreign jihadist groups and foreign powers, and at the same time, it is the only point where on which they agree altogether, because then they can agree on anything. So that's a part of Libya challenge, I would say. And when you look at this neighborhood, the biggest country on the region, you have another kind of paradox, I would say. You have Egypt, at the same time is the largest state and is one of the most fragile states of the region, especially in North Africa. When you look at Mr. Marshal Sisi objectives, the first objective is to ensure the regime survival and the stability, internal stability, with uncontrolled growth of the population, 100 million, more than 100 million population, which is rising very, very fast, and all the socio-economic challenges connected. The second priority is, and to preserve the stability, is fighting the political Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood. It was the case with Morsi, and you know that Sisi overcome Morsi government. And then he is in the middle of the fight between, I mentioned, but Qatar, Turkey, Muslim Brotherhood on one end, and Emirates, Saudi Arabia on the other, and Salafist on the other end. He wants third political aim is to re-establish itself, Egypt, as a regional power, without upsetting Saudi Arabia in the Arab world and the Muslim world, but clearly with Turkey as a contender, I would say, an opposing power, regional opposing power. There is an issue with Ethiopia because of the Nile and because of the dam on the Nile, and the fact that it's vital for Egypt to have the water of the Nile, and then try to be friend with everyone, try to balance in the international relations between the US, Russia, China, between all the regional powers, and that is part of the game for Marshal Sisi. Another point which is very important to understand the position of Sisi is the connection, the necessity for him to work with Israel to eradicate the insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula. And so clearly, it is a way to understand the very strong connection between Egypt and Israel. Just to speak about Israel, I just wanted to say that Israel, the motto of Israel could be clever or die, because they are very vulnerable. And the main objective is to stay as long as possible as the only nuclear military power in the Middle East. And so to prevent Iran or any other state of the region to reach the nuclear threshold. So it's very difficult. but they will do their best for that, because for them it's very, very important in terms of survival. So to do that, they want, like, their aim is to federate an anti-Iran regional front. That's the logic of the Abraham Accords, and maybe we can discuss about it later. To do everything possible to avoid, and that's another point, the creation of the Palestinian state. So trying to make things longer and longer, and whatever, but the aim is to avoid this creation, to maintain the connection with the United States, while, and that's part of the game, preserving economic ties with China, the rising economic power of the world, which is very important for them, and that's part of the equation, and then never be isolated at the UN. So there is a very strong diplomacy policy with Israel inside Europe, inside the UN, to be always, to have enough people, enough countries supporting Israel. A word about, and this map is just to finish this map. I wanted to show you that to illustrate how what I call the middleization of the Mediterranean, the more and more the involvement of the Middle East inside the Mediterranean. I spoke about Qatar, I spoke about the Emirates, I spoke about Saudi Arabia, and now I spoke about Iran. Iran wants a corridor in the Med. Iran wants to have leverage in the Med. Hezbollah is part of this leverage, but not only Shiite militia in Syria, Hamas. So they want to be part of to be there. They want to be a Mediterranean power, and Israel want to get rid of Iran, which is seen as the main opponent in the region. And so there is an opposition to know where the deterrence line will be drawn between the two areas of influence, and that's the aim of this map, is to show this fight. Israelian wanted to make it north and Iranian south. The last power regional power I would like to describe is Turkey. I was hesitating to put it on my last paragraph, my last point, among the big regional power alongside Russia. Because in my view, Turkey, and I would not have said that 10 years ago, but today, Turkey is a regional power that emancipates itself and which becomes stronger and stronger, and which will never be the same as before. I'm sure of that. That's my understanding. When you look at the priority of Turkey, first you have Kurdistan. The first aim for Turkey is to avoid the creation of an independent Kurdistan in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Iran, in Syria, just to be sure that the 20% of the population of Turkey which are Kurd will never have the idea of creating an independent state. The second point is, as a lot of countries in this region, is a jihadist threat. So Idlib for them is very important because it's fixed all the jihadists, most of the jihadist threats in this little point. The second point for Erdogan is to sustain AKP, which is his party, control, and for that continue purges, internal purges inside the militaries, control the military, to manipulate, to use the Turkish nationalism by gaining influence in big parts of the former Ottoman Empire, in the Balkans, in Cyprus, in Libya, in Tunisia, in Algeria, in Sudan, Lebanon, everywhere, by stigmatizing, all the old enemies, Greece, Armenia, Cyprus, South Greece, South Cyprus, and to try to develop influence of Turkey everywhere, in Africa, in Europe, in Afghanistan, for example. Last point to sustain the AKP control is to use an Islamic nationalist agenda with the Muslim Brotherhood. I spoke already on that, sorry. To secure the re-election of President Erdogan in 2023, the 100th anniversary of the Republic of Turkey. That is very, very important. And the last point, another point is to relaunch the economy, which is very, very, very bad shape. So increasing partnership with China, with Asia, with Russia, with the Caucasus, with Azerbaijan. The gas issue is key for them because of that, and the connection with EU is very important because the EU is a provider of money, a strong provider of money, and the first partner in terms of economy with Turkey. And the last point is to, and that's key to understand Turkey, and it's not connected only with Erdogan. I'm sure that it will be the case even with a change of regime, to assert the sovereignty of the Turkish nation, which will never be aligned as it was, as it used to be. So to weaken the European Union, to manage the relationship between the United States and Russia, and Russia and Turkey as holding each other very strongly. We can discuss about it later, and to continue the indigenization of the Turkish defense industry, which is very important, and we can see its influence even in the Ukraine war. So this slide shows exactly what I said, but it shows as well that Turkey is at the center of the middle of the East Med issues, and it will stay that way, whatever will be the next election in Turkey in 2023. Another point is that the big powers game, and this area is a zone where you have the rivalries between big powers. I will go very fast because you know it very well. Everywhere in the Middle East and Europe are saying that the United States are leaving this area. It's not true. You know that better than I do. There are still a lot of military personnel in this area, more than 60,000. But the perception issue is very, very important. The fact that Obama, Trump, and even Biden said that they want to shift eastwards, that it was no more a priority for the United States. The perception issue is that the United States is no more involved in this area, which is not the case, but which gives, which open room of maneuver for a lot of countries, a lot of powers, big and regional powers. That's part of the game. The Ukraine issue probably will change a little bit the perception of it, but okay, we can later on it if needed. I wanted to stay my time. Russia is coming back. That's quite normal, in fact. When Russia wants to go outside, I would say, to be a global power, or even a regional power, they have to go through warm seas, and to go to join the warm seas, they have to go through the Med, and to go through the Med, they have to go through the Turkish Straits, and to go to the Turkish Straits, they have to control the Black Sea. So everything is coherent, I would say. The problem with Russia is not that there are an actor there, it is because the stand of Russia vis-à-vis Europe, vis-à-vis the West, the aggressivity, and so Russia is coming back, and Russia is coming back strongly and in opposition as more than spoilers, clearly in an opposition towards Europe and towards the US. China is coming not back, is coming for the first time, more on a economical aspect, but you know China, you know the unrestricted warfare theory. Economy is very connected with military, with cultural, with politics, with all the other aspects. And there is a big game there, and this area is part of it. Is part of it. I have already mentioned it, and just thought I just want to underline it. Because of the perception of the disengagement of the US, and because the fact that Europe is still not an actor, a geopolitical actor in this area, there is plenty of room of maneuver, and you have more and more players in the area. It's incredible to see how now the freedom of action of Israel, of the Emirates, of Iran, of all the countries. And that's new. It was not the case 20 years ago, I can assure you. And it's quite like a return, you know, a boomerang effect. We were trying to westernize the Middle East, and now Europe and this area is Middle Easternized, if I may, this barbarism. One absent is Europe, and I can elaborate a little bit more if you are interested in that point. NATO is not the good tool to use to deal with Middle East because it is connected with Russia, and so Ukraine is now putting this issue very high in the agenda, and so NATO will go back to its main business, I would say. And Europe is not yet a real power. You know, France is pushing a lot to make Europe an actor. Europe pour money, trying to solve problems only with money, but we military knows that it's clearly not enough, and not enough money, but not enough politics, and politics is not only economy. I would like to have a word about Ukraine impact because it's a good illustration, I would say, of what I've said before. Ukraine will increase tensions. And I told you this area is a concentrate of tensions already. It will polarize international relations between Russia and its allies and the West, putting all other aspects in the second place. And it's not completely good news because it will leave blind spots. And these blind spots, which will not interest the US, for example, will be used by regional powers to push their points. And Europe and France must not lose sight of these blind spots and manage them on their own. And my last point on general, and then I have written some. The world is watching us on Ukraine, especially we, the Europeans. If we do not show the courage to defend our interests, our value, our models, our friends, the countries around us will draw their conclusions, and they will not be very unfavorable to European countries. That's my point. And I'm sure it's a bit the same with the US, but my understanding is that the European countries are much more in a critical position. So MENA switch to the second priority. It's not good news for us, and you will see China and regional countries push their pawns in the region. So we have to be aware of it. For Iran and Israel, it's a very difficult situation because they have very strong connection with Russia. 20% of the population of Israel are coming from Russia. And Iran was dealing for the JCPOA with the US and everything is blocked. It's not good news for them. For Turkey, it's much more, in my view, an opportunity to try to triangle, I would say, and we can say it every day, triangle between Russia, the US, Europe, Ukraine, and try to be at the center point of the geopolitical center point of the region. The problem of the wheat price coming from Ukraine and Russia, clearly it will add tensions, internal tensions in the south, and had tensions, as you understand, I guess. Now, the fact that the oil and gas price are booming is good news for some of them, but it's not good news for Tunisia. It's not good news for Egypt. Not good news for Lebanon, Syria. So they will suffer a lot, and so we will have problems. All the countries which are very close connections and which have ordered Russian weapons, first of all, they will wait to have the deliveries because I guess the Russians will keep the weapons for them. And my last point on that items is that they will have a very close look at what will be the end of the story. And everybody has noticed that the Middle East was very prudent not to choose too clearly their camp between Russia and the West. That's for sure. And so we will have a problem with that. To sum up and to conclude, history is back. History is back with tensions, armed forces, geopolitics. The West, and especially Europe, is less and less a model and more a target. And so we have to take it into account. I think the US and Europe will stand together in front of Russia, and maybe that for sure. But there is a need for a form of strategic of autonomy, because there will be some times and some issues where the US will not want to be involved. Clearly, the migration issue, the Islamic terrorist issue is not an issue for the US, and it's an issue for European countries. And China, Asia issues is an issue for the US, is an issue for France, by the way, because we are very involved in Asia Pacific, but not for Germany, for example. So clearly there is a need to have a form of strategic autonomy, and it will be good for both areas, for the United States and for European countries. And we are entering in a neo-Bismarckian world. Just to elaborate one sentence. A neo-Bismarckian world is a world where alliances will be of variable geometry. So partner of one day can be an opponent in another day. And it's not a scandal. It can happen. It can happen. And we have to deal with that. It's not always easy for soldiers to accept it, because dying for a partner, against an opponent who can be a partner the day after, it's not very easy. But we have to take it into account that in this complex world, this can happen. And we have to avoid a too simplistic and too Manichaean perspective, especially in the MENA region, where things are very complex. And in this world, which is very complex and much more complex, and we have to be clever. We have to be clever, especially for countries, for medium-sized country as France. We have to be clever. We have to be courageous. and not only courageous, you know, courageous and clever, and not only clever, courageous as well. And so I guess your job in the future will be very different from the job from your senior officers, for the job I have done for now, nearly 40 years. And the world in which you are going to live is completely different from your parents' world. So you will have to imagine and to understand a new world with new rules, but it will be very demanding. And once again, you have to be clever and brave. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you so much. And I'm you've said a lot, and I have questions, but I first wait until see if any of our students have questions. But I'm glad that you ended it with that note of us, all of us, having to be more clever and look at things, the complexity of which you so fully told us. I think we here at MCU and at Krulak Center, that is our hope to, you know, we have a statement here from our namesake, General Krulak: if you don't educate, you're finished. We hope to do that through education here, through making sure that our officers who come and stay with us for a year or so get a chance to look at the complexity without the pressures of the daily tasks that a military officer has. So when they go there, they see exactly what you so well you know, illustrated. I will not ask a question until our students do. Just want to say that, you know, you talked about 1981 going in there post 1979. That is the reason I became an American. So I was became homeless right after that, and this country opened its arms. So here I am and became a Marine. My question to you comes back to two specific countries within this complex scope, as you mentioned, and that is Russia and Turkey. You know, you ended by saying Turkey is looking at the situation in Ukraine as an opportunity. I totally agree with that, as we know that they have invoked the Montreux Convention, which gives them a lot of power, but also responsibility. The 30 or so vessels of Russia that are outside, they cannot now enter the Black Sea. As this situation in Ukraine evolves, how do you see the role of Turkey and Russia vis-a-vis the power play? I mean, if Russia wants to exert more influence in the Mediterranean, at its base in Syria specifically, or Libya, or elsewhere, and if Turkey wants to exert more, take more opportunities, will these opportunities, in your view, in the near future, be coordinated with Russia, or they will make, but Turkey try to use it as such to make itself a more of a formidable power, and also a power that the West look at as perhaps a bulwark against Russian expansion, further expansion into the Mediterranean?
I would say that I think they will try to continue how they are dealing right now. I mean, Turkey and Russia are, I would say, historically in opposition, because they are confronting for the dominance of the Black Sea. They are confronting for the dominance of the Caucasus. So there are plenty of reasons to be opposed. And at the same time, there are plenty of reasons to cooperate, because they are not strong enough alone. They need to cooperate just beginning economically. Turkey is a very good client for the gas, Russian gas, and a good way to transfer the gas towards Europe, which is the main consumer. That's the first point. They are obliged to cooperate because they are not strong enough to be the only power in Africa, in the North Africa, in the Middle East, and they share the same view. That's the key point, which is a new one. They share the same view vis-à-vis Europe and vis-à-vis the West. I think it would be a huge mistake to think that after Erdogan, Turkey is going back to be a very good little soldier of the West. These times are over. This time are over because the world changed, the Muslim world have completely changed, and the psyche of the Turkish population has changed. And you know, the influence of Atatürk, laicity, all that stuff which has been which has been very important for Turkey for decades, which was, by the way, at the end, very strongly implemented by the military. And one of the difficulties in Turkey during the beginning of the 21st century is that the Democrats were less westernized than the authoritarian. The military in Turkey that I know for my generation, they were very Western-minded, and but they were not Democrats, in fact. And the population is much more connected with the Middle East, with the Islamic world. They are much less at ease with the way the European societies are evolving. And so their vision of the future is not always connected and not completely connected with the Western world. And so it will be the vision of Turkey as part of a new world, which is another model than the European model, is completely in line with the vision of Russia today, with Putin Russia, and most of the people in Russia. Most of them are very westernized. It's the same in Turkey. But there are now a minority, and the trend, I would say, that's the de-westernization of the world. The trend is not on that way. So I see in the future opposition between Turkey and Russia in the Caucasus, in North Syria, in Libya, even in Mali, for example, in the Sahelian zone. Competition, in fact, between them more than opposition. Sometimes opposition and sometimes competition, but they will join when they will face Europe, and they will join when they will face the United States. With the United States, it's more complex because the need for the United States for Turkey is much more important than the need for the weight of the European countries are less important because there are no political weight in Europe right now. And that's the reason why my guess is that Erdogan and his successor, if he has a successor, will try to manage this jeu à trois between Russia, United States, and Turkey. And it's exactly what's happened in Ukraine. And I would say that we have to take it into account, which doesn't mean by no way that we have to antagonize Turkey. We have to take it into account, to accept it, and to deal with that. And probably to show that we are not afraid of strength of force. You know, use the strength, use the force, use the strength of use of force if needed. That's exactly what EU has said, have done in 21, beginning of 21, with the Cyprus issue, the gas Cyprus issue. You know, Turkey was preventing Cyprus to prospect his gas in his EEZ, and at the opposite was making prospection in Greek and Cyprus waters. And the EU has said that they will, they intend to, EU intend to use retaliation, economic retaliation in front of that, and Turkey accept it and sees its prospection. So clearly, it's good illustration of the new world. Can oppose a country without any being an enemy of this country, but you have to accept the new rules of this world, which is more brutal than it used to be 20 years ago, or 15 years, or even 10 years ago.
Thank you, sir. Major Brown will take over the Q&A. He has the chat. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so we'll start with Lieutenant Colonel Segantini, sir. I see your hand up, so if you're able to ask on your microphone, just go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Segantini, French Army. Just a quick question. You described a world where there are some big ruptures, and the fact that Turkey is probably one of the great emergent powers in this region. My question is, looking back to the French vision on the European Union and NATO, the fact that we used to consider that both are the two sides of the same coin. Do you see any room for, let's say, a new way to see the European security architecture with Turkey, in a sense that take the opportunity for this the position of Turkey to have a different approach, I would say, that we used to have before the current crisis?
I would say that it shows the neo-Bismarckian world, I would say. When you look at Russia, and clearly we are entering a new phase of confrontation with Russia. We can hope that it will stay a Cold War, even if it's a hot war right now. But clearly it will be a big confrontation for decades. And Turkey must be on our side, I would say. And NATO will be very important in that field. NATO will be important because NATO is a very structured military alliance with the US on board and with Turkey on board. And Turkey is the southern flank of NATO. So clearly, it's a perfect tool to face this kind of opposition. And we will be alongside, and we will work with Turkey, and probably military, French militaries will be alongside their counterparts, Turkey's counterparts on that field. But dealing with North Africa, dealing with Middle East, dealing with Sub-Saharan Africa, we will be in a competition with Turkey, and not a very friendly competition. They will pour money to put Europeans away of Turkey, and dealing with Islam radicalism in Europe, with the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe, with the diaspora. Clearly, we will have problems with Turkey. And so there will be discussion, competitions, sometimes opposition between European countries and Turkey on that field, which doesn't mean that we will be enemies. That's the reason why we have to get rid of Manichaean vision and to accept this complexity. And you know, even with Russia, maybe in the future we'll have a new pandemic, a huge economic crisis, a problem of who knows, plenty of things, and we will be in a position to cooperate with Russia. And also at the same time we'll be in opposition, sometimes in confrontation, and sometimes in cooperation with the same country. That's not so easy to swallow for military people, because when you are risking your life, You are not very happy with the idea of risking your life for against a country which can be a friend next day. That's a problem. But clearly, we have to accept this kind of issue. So I guess I hope I have answered your question. But I wanted to underline a specific point with the US, because the US, the American state of mind is often quite a little bit Manichaean state vision of the world. And the American often needs to know who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. And you are with us or against us. My understanding, it would be a big failure if we are telling that to the people in the world, everybody will be against us. Look at the reaction after the Ukraine wars, not only in the Middle East, quite everywhere in the world. People, even the countries which are following the US, even or the West, because we are completely on the same side with on that field, we are Europeans, countries who are keen to follow the US are not at ease at all with this notion of choosing their camp. And so if we oblige, if we train to force countries to choose, maybe they will not choose our camp. And that will be a big failure. We will antagonize a lot of countries. And we don't need it at all, because China is behind it, behind Russia. China is very clever. China has a very long-term strategy. China's clearly interests are not often online with our interests. I would say, if I may, that European interests are not always the same that American interests, but they are more or less often the same, which is not the same thing. And so we have to adapt it, to accept it, and to deal with that. And back to Turkey, because it will be an issue for the future. You will see Turkey will look at Ukraine. So they prevent Russian ships to go inside the Black Sea. Good, that's a good point for us. But they refused to forbid Russian airplane to go in Turkey, and the business, it's business as usual. And that's not a good thing for us. But we have, first of all, they do what they want, and so we can't force them. And then we have to accept this position and try to use it in our interests. That's the question of being clever. How to use the position of somebody, of a country, which is not in line with you. That's key. That's key. So, you know, there will be another question, less tricky for Europe, but a little bit far away, but clearly very important. It's the peninsula, Arabic Peninsula. You can see that Chinese, Russia are very, very more and more involved there against the US, not only against Europe, but against the US, that's for sure. And if the Americans are not clever enough, I don't want to give the impression that I give lessons, but you know, are not very in line with this new situation, they will lose. They could lose the peninsula, which will be a very tricky thing, because if Saudi Arabia choose China, we are going to lose a lot of things, and not only the gas and the petrol, but as well, you know, the way to go through the Red Sea, and that could be a very tricky thing especially for militaries.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Our next question is from Captain Neil Boltman, one of our EWS students here, and the question is: do you believe the discovery of gas reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean is a serious tension builder between Turkey and its neighbors, or is it simply exacerbating existing territorial disputes? Is this a real long-term problem or a temporary problem?
I would say that this problem came clearly from the Turkey side. It means that I'm not saying at all that Turkey is the bad guys in this story. I'm saying that Erdogan chose deliberately to use this issue as a tool to put the pressure on Cyprus, on Greece, on Europe. That was a choice he made very deliberately, because he could have done completely differently. My point, it's a guess, only a guess. My guess is that maybe because of the global tensions and the new framework which is now in place and progressively in place, he will probably try to ease this kind of tensions, which by no way means that he will go back in line with the EU, with the West, with the neighborhood, and so on. Not at all. But because he will just consider that his interest, Turkey's interest, is better defended in cooperation on that field than by confrontation. That's only a pure rational point of view. So my point is that, for sure, if Turkey joined the forum, East Med Gas Forum, it would be good news for everybody, more or less, because they will be able to launch big programs, big projects to use this gas. And you know that Europeans are looking for new gas to get rid of Russian gas, and they are ready to pay for that. And the price, the rising of the oil price, is very good news for this kind of project. So yeah, you have a lot of money to earn if you agree and everybody agrees to pump the gas in this area. They can be very easily connected with Turkey hub, which already exists with the TANAP pipe in Turkey. So Turkey will benefit from this exploitation. It could be not a good news for Egypt, which has on his way as well installations to exploit his gas, but I'm sure that a deal can be done between Turkey and Egypt on that field. And so it could be a win-win arrangement, not so good, not as good as Erdogan thought 2 years ago, but much better than it is today. So I think it can improve. My point is just that, and it would be a good thing, because at the end of the day, it would create cooperation. It will reintegrate Turkey in the framework of its neighborhoods in Eastern Med. So very good news for that. But be sure that there is always an issue with the islands of the Aegean Seas, with Castelnaudary, with the fact that there is a very strong nationalist feeling in Turkey, which has been pushed by Erdogan, and it's not so easy to explain to the people that we will deal now with the Greek, and it was not so important. So now, you know, when you are putting the flames on, it's sometimes difficult to ease the fire, and so this point will be an issue for a political issue for Erdogan, especially before the next election, because they will. It's very easy for him to try to use this nationalist trend, which he push now for 10 years at least, and 15 years. So it's a little bit tricky. But my guess is that they will try to find an accommodation, and that Greek, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel is more or less ready to have an accommodation. But as soon as Erdogan will have the feeling that it is in his interest to recreate the tensions, on this issue or on other issues as well, he will do it. He will do it. It's not a problem. People are not, once again, separated between bad guys and good guys. It was a question of interest, and now people are defending their own interest without any inhibition, which was not the case, it was not the paradigm 30 years ago. And that's the main difficulties for especially European countries, but maybe for US as well, for American people as well, is to understand that we are now back in the logic of interests and not, you know, common civilization, common model, and we share the same value, and that's it. In fact, it's no more the case. It doesn't mean that our values are not important, and we have to fight for it if needed. But we have to accept that our values are not shared completely by others who are other models, and they defend their models, they defend their interest, and it's good. It is the new rule of the game. So just to sum up, there is an opportunity to have an ease in these gas issues in the East Med.
Sir, thank you for a. If anybody has a last minute question, right here, but we are 4 minutes past your time. We know that it's afternoon for you, sir. We truly appreciate your very comprehensive talk in this, both for understanding the Eastern Mediterranean as a whole, but also the overarching aspects of what this new phase in the world, the complex phase we are entering. I think for all of us, whether we are on the military uniform side or looking at this from a civilian side or just citizens of all of our countries, I think this phase is important. I share your views and also concerns. I will say it's not fear, but it's concern. We have to be a bit more, we have to go with our eyes open, and we have to make compromises in certain places. I again agree on that one. So thank you very much. I hope to be in contact with you directly, but also collectively, center to center. We appreciate your support of our work, and I think this is a learning journey that we have with the FEMES and our centers, and hopefully we can jointly make our leaders and our students learn about this. Have a very good weekend, sir. And again, merci beaucoup. Thank you, and au revoir. Bye-bye.
Just a word to say that we have produced a new atlas of the MENA area, Middle East, North Africa. It's completely free. It is online. It is very military-oriented atlas. Right now, it is only available in French, but we will have an English version in 2 weeks' time, inline, once again, completely free. Most of the maps I show you are coming from this atlas. My aim is to promote the reflection and to promote the vision that this area is very, very important. They're quite complex, but understandable if we make the effort to try to understand it. And that, once again, not to be completely overwhelmed by the Russia issue, which is key and which has connection in the MENA region, as I told you. But there are other problems, and we have to take it into account. And this atlas is dedicated for that. So do not hesitate to read it, to send it. Once again, it's free. It's just for you, just for people trying to make us collectively more clever.
Thank you so much, sir. I will actually go to your website. I was in a French school, so I can read it, but we have others here who can read that. And by the time it becomes English, we will use and maybe even steal some of your maps and use them as our own educational tools. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you somewhere soon. In that, I will be in the region. I may actually come and knock on your door.
Okay.
Thank you.
It will be a pleasure to see you back in Europe if you come. And thank you, Emin. Thank you, Ayam, and everybody.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.